6:05, and we are calling the meeting to order. We have one person in public comment. Does she have? Lauren Iote. We would like to hear from you. You can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Hi, Ashley and Dr. Mike. I just wanted to introduce myself. I am the Faced-In PTO secretary and a Faced-In parent of a kindergartner and a second grader. And I just wanted to put another shout out encouragement for you guys to keep continuing to think about the preschool hubs and to consider Faced-In as one of those hubs. It has received 5 stars from the Early Childhood Education, which is the highest rating, making it pretty spectacular. Its floor plan and classroom size is the largest amongst the district, making it really incredible for some gross motor and different stations. And I've heard a lot about in order to pick, these hubs, thinking the best about a program that has extended care. And I will say that Faced-In partners really well with the OHASC preschool. And while it is not on site, I actually think the continuation and the trip on the 8-minute bus ride to Waitsfield School is actually exciting for the students, and they love it. I have a pre-K 4 student currently, and my own kids have done the OHAS program for the last 4 years for the preschool program, and it's truly incredible. So I don't really consider that a limiting factor at all. That that Faced-In doesn't have an on-site after-school program. And I do wonder what could be explored with the off-day cares. And then lastly, the thing I'd like to point out, and I think some of the community knows this, and perhaps they don't, but that of the 23 students enrolled in Faced-In pre-K, 11 of them do not reside in Faced-In. Some of them are from Waitsfield, Warren, and Rochester. And so that means we have families choosing to attend the Faced-In preschool. And I only think long-term about if Faced-In loses its preschool, what will that do to the school big picture? Or if you have someone in preschool who needs to go to Moortown and someone in Faced-In at 3rd grade, are you going to choose to pull your 3rd grader from Faced-In to send them both to Moortown because the logistics make sense? And I just worry about the numbers long term if we lose the preschool at Faced-In. And so I've encouraged my friends who have incoming students in the preschool to vocalize some of the same concerns. And I hope you guys will consider Faced-In as a hub, and also be super transparent with the community about the process in which you are taking to pick which hubs to choose and the criteria, because that hasn't been, I don't think, super clear to the community at this point. So that's all I'd like to share.
Thank you, Lauren. We appreciate your comments, and we are doing our best to be as transparent as possible and to get information out to people. We are doing that every day. But thank you for your comments. Would you like to speak?
Okay. Can you hear me? All right. Hi, I am Jessica Knoop, and I work for the Open Hearth. I run the preschool out of the Waitsfield School. It does actually work really well for the kids to ride the bus. I do think it's exciting for them. I assist them in the first week of school. I go over to the Faced-In school and help, ride the bus with them. But it really only takes me doing that one time before they've got the hang of it. I pick them up from the bus and help them with their stuff. And I think they really enjoy it. But I run out of the preschool space in the Waitsfield school since there isn't a preschool there. So Waitsfield also have a wonderful space for preschool. There's a licensed program. We have our own preschool license. So we already have that, in place. So I'm available to extend those hours or change those hours as needed. So yeah, I guess I was just wanting to say both of those things and maybe advocate for my job a little bit. And I do think that it's working well and that there's potential to extend that program if need be, since there's already a running preschool license in that space. And I guess, yeah, I guess that's it. I work really closely with Rachel, the preschool teacher at Facein. We have a good working relationship, and I think that both programs partner well together, and is a really, has great enrichment for the kids, and they get a lot out of both programs. Having a little bit of variation in the day is not a terrible thing, as opposed to being, 10 hours, 5 days a week in one space. So, but I would be willing to do, whatever the community needs to help fill the preschool, the needs of the families. So thank you.
Thanks, Jess. We appreciate your comments. Yeah. Is there anyone else online who wants to speak? Please raise your virtual hand. Okay. Okay. Not seeing anyone, that will end public comment. Okay, moving on. We're going to, we need to approve the agenda, but prior to approving it, we need to slightly amend it and remove number 10, the executive session. We should have taken that off when we were writing the agenda. So I'm going to make a motion to remove the executive session that we don't need. Can I have a second? Second from Steve. All those in favor? Aye. All right. So now I'm looking for a motion to approve this agenda without number 10. Bobby, Pam seconds. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. The first thing we're going to do tonight is hear from Jody from CVCC, who's going to give her budget presentation. Welcome, Jody. It's great to see you. And you can sit in the seat and turn on the mic.
Thank you for having me. I am Jody Emerson, Superintendent Director of the Central Vermont Career Center in Barrie, and we have many Harwood students in our center this year. It's always great to see students arriving every morning and getting off those buses or walking in from where they park on Air Street and coming through our doors. We greet students at the door every day, and I have Tuesday morning duty, so it's awesome to see your students join us. I have shortened this presentation a little bit from the past because a lot of it is the same information that we've shared in the past. So hopefully that helps you all out with your meeting tonight. Mike, you can go. We do start with the mission, a reminder that we are a career and technical education center. So students come, they spend some time in the classroom working on theory, and then there's also that connected experiential learning that helps them to develop the skills they need for the workforce. And so that's our primary objective. And as you know, from the times that I've been here before, we continue to have increasing demand and not enough space. So we're still working on that, despite that failed bond vote. So that's one of the goals. Good job, Mike. So we continue to think about how we might expand opportunities for students who are interested. And so we're looking at some short-term goals while we have a separate work group kind of revisiting everything that the facilities committee did from 2018 until this year to see, is there something we missed? Is there another opportunity? Is there another option? Also knowing that there is so much up in the air with the state legislature and what could happen that is really unpredictable, and we may not We may come back with another bond vote. We may not. So there is no guarantee around that one. I think we're just revisiting everything to make sure that whatever proposal comes forth for the future is, again, the one that we can stand behind. We did stand behind that initial one, and there were a lot of concerns. And I think one of the goals of the board is to increase communication. And we heard from our consultants who are working on our comprehensive local needs assessment that we haven't done that yet. That while we are communicating regularly, we're still not getting people to understand what we do and where we need to go and why we need to go there. So those are our goals. Most of the conditions that impact budgeting at the Career Center are the same ones that impact you. So it's going to be the increases in healthcare. It's going to be the increases in dental this year. It's the increases in salaries and for our instructors. It's the cost of supplies, and our supplies are very different. And so you can imagine that some of the wire we need in electrical is skyrocketing in price, for example. Some of the tools and equipment that we need. So those are the things that we're thinking about, while we're also thinking about how can we provide more access to students. Go ahead. 70% of our budget is salary and benefits, and across the state, it's about 70 to 80%. That's true for all schools. For us, we have a 7% increase in our budget next year. That's about $360,000 because we are a $5 million, just over $5 million budget. So this year's budget, or FY27 budget, is $5,472,467. So again, that's just over $360,000 more than last year. And what a steal it's going to be. So this slide has by object code. The next one is function code, just kind of showing you where are the monies going that we're getting. And a reminder that we do have a separate ballot from yours, but our budget is really built into yours based on that 6-semester average of students you send to us. And that's where we have to budget for discrepancy. You'll see in the next slide when we get to it that we have the number of students we have versus the number of students that we can bill for in our tuition. So we have to take that full amount of our cost and spread it out across the billable students. And for us, it's different than yours. You have the long-term weighted ADM, and we have the 6-semester average from our sending schools. So 3 years worth of data to look at to make that decision. And that's what we have to base it on. We're looking at, again, all those other things that might impact us in the future as well. It's really hard from my seat right now to see that, but I do know that some of the discrepancies between the FTEs and the headcount is that we have adult students as well. So if we don't fill one of our day programs with students, adults can apply and they can get in. The law for us is that we can charge 40% of the student tuition to adults. VSAC will pay a grant, which takes care of most of that for them. So it's, I think, $6,500 this year. It might be $7,500 is what it costs for an adult who's attending our day program. We do have separate adult ed programs. You'll see there's a discrepancy of about 2 in that first year. I'm going from memory because I can't see it, FY24. And then below it, you can see that what our 6-semester average is. So if you're looking at FY27, when we look at that, if we filled every single program, and this doesn't usually happen, we have some programs we turn students away because we don't have enough space for them. And those are the programs that are most popular. And then some programs that are under-enrolled or not as popular. And so sometimes we have a little bit of space in those. If we filled every program and we allowed the 5 co-op students on top of that in those programs that could have a second year where kids are working out in the field, then we could have 277 students next year. We can only bill for 198.2, I think it is. Yeah. So that's obviously if we could bill for all of them, the amount of the tuition would be lower. The cost is still the same, right? The reason for the 6-semester average is that it's meant to kind of make it a sort of a levelish field for all of you so that you're not having a spike if you have 20 more kids come one year and then a huge decrease if the next year. So it's predictable for you. That's why they did that for CTE. My priorities this year were we hired a second electrical teacher last year. That was our highest demand program last year. And we expanded it a little bit. We also sent several students down to Randolph Tech and filled their electrical program last year. So we are going to separate those two out this year. We had the benefit of having that new instructor learn from our existing instructor in a collaboration. They intend to collaborate with two separate programs because one of them has real strengths in residential and one of them has real strengths in industrial electrical. So it's going to be great for students, whichever program they end up in, because they get to work with both instructors. We also, Randolph closed their early childhood program this current year. And so we are opening one next year. Talking about. So if you know someone who's looking for a job, we do need an early childhood education instructor, and we would like to hire them sooner than later so that they can work to find the lab spaces, which will not be on site, to bring our students to so that they can learn with kids. East Montpelier Elementary signed up, kind of stepped in first and said we would host your program. That's a little step back now because they may, if Calais closes, they may end up being full with students there. But we do have space for the classroom on our campus. So we're going to have the students in-house for the theory portion and then going out to pre-Ks and Head Starts to work with youth and learn from their lab portion or their experiential on-site. So we're looking forward to that. If you know anyone, School Spring is where the job posting is. We would love to have some applicants for that. We have shadows coming up in a couple of weeks, and then we have program preview day the day before Feb break. And if we could have our new instructor there to meet with the students who are interested, we have 14 applicants so far for that. We're also putting in a new dust collection system in our building trades space. Yeah.
What's the educational requirement for that teacher? That
generally it's maybe they're a licensed teacher already. If they're not, having a bachelor's degree is helpful in this piece. Not required. 5 years of experience in early childhood can get them through the door. Thanks for asking. This is the announced tuition that we had from the current school year, so you can see where we are among the career and technical education schools across the state. So there are 17 CTEs, and you can see we're in that lower range. If nobody else increased, we would just jump over one. I don't anticipate that's happening, so I think we're going to be in the same space for FY27. Revenue sources. So some of our funding comes off the top of the ed fund. So instead of coming to you, if they're your 6 semester average, it comes directly to us. And then some of it we bill to you. We also get some salary assistance for some of our positions and a few other grants, including a Perkins, which is a federal grant. And that requires every 2 years that we do a comprehensive local needs assessment. We are in the middle of that. If you haven't filled out our survey yet and you want to give us some feedback, we would love that. And anyone listening as well. I'm trying to get some more information to help us make the decisions for the future. It's kind of our strategic planning in CTE. I just signed the announced tuition today that had to go into the state. It's due tomorrow. It is $21,874, but what you end up paying for the part that doesn't come straight from the ed fund is, I can't read it, 10,666? 366, 10,366. Thank you. Which is a 4.9% increase over last year. So we had a 7% total budget increase, 4.9% on the amount that you need to kind of put in your line items and think about for your 6 semester average. Is the next one the thank you? Question.
Looking at the announced tuitions for FY26, and Hannaford is like way above. Is there any particular reason why they would be so skewed?
Yeah, they have the most recent build. So they have a bond that they're paying back. They also could serve 200 more students. And so that obviously, if you can have more students, if you could spread it out, it would be a lower tuition rate. So they're not able to get in the students that we are. it would be nice if we were all closer together, or if we could find ways to spread out the love. But we don't. So we are running into this where we have to turn kids away because we don't have enough space. Hannaford is in a position where they're like, come to us, come to us. They have the space and they don't turn anyone away. Middlebury.
So looking at page 9 with the colored bars on head counts.
Yeah.
So it looks like for fiscal year 27, you have slightly more capacity than you actually had in fiscal year 26. I mean, but you are turning students away, is that right?
Yeah. So one of the things you need to think about is the fact that, for instance, for our applications for next year, the top program is automotive, 70 applicants for 16 seats. So some of those students that might not get into automotive, they might have chosen something else for a second choice that they can get into. If they don't get into either of their first or second choice, they have to apply again in their second round for another program. Unfortunately, what we've seen is that the popular programs are automotive, exploratory, electrical, plumbing and heating, and medical professions. And so sometimes students are applying for those, and then when they're denied access and looking for how can I get in, they're applying for other popular programs. And so we're trying to be more clear about these are the ones that have space, because otherwise we end up putting students on wait lists.
About what percent of the applicants are you actually able to admit?
We have, so first round right now, we have 303 students. If they were spread out, then we could admit several of them, right? Most of them, but they're not spread out that way. Last year, we had 414 total students that applied, and we accepted 200. Well, we ended up with 216. We actually accepted 240. Some chose to other decisions over the summer. Yeah.
So our tuition, or we're setting roughly $10,000 per student. Does that impact the students that we send? Does that impact our LTW ADM, or do we get full funding for those students and then send partial funding away? We get the full funding.
I didn't warn you I'm going to ask you a question, but I want to preface it with just I've been involved intensely as a superintendent with CT, career and technology education for a very long time, superintendency, and I visited shortly after arriving. Jody gave me a tour. We spent the morning together. I visited, and then Jody meets with the other regional superintendents once a month. So we have a very close collaborative relationship. I've been very impressed with the work of CVCC. They have excellent programs, but I have a question, kind of a loaded question, just for all of you to ask. A lot of people in our community, a lot of times our board hears from people, oh, we used to have a building trades program. Why don't we bring back the building trades program? And it was an exceptional program. I know very well the teacher who retired from that program. But would you explain a little bit about the complexities that we've seen over the last maybe 20 years with the career and technical education, and one of the reasons why schools like ours don't have the same kinds of programs they did 20 years ago, just so they have some good answers for when people ask them in the community who remember those programs from the past?
Yeah, I'll actually start with saying my son is a graduate of Harwood Union High School. He attended here. He was graduated in 2019. And if it hadn't been for the electrical and the motor program, whatever that was that they did, like small engine stuff, he probably wouldn't have made it as far as he did. He then went to Randolph Tech for his junior and senior years. He got waitlisted at Central Vermont. I was not there. Not that he would have gotten in if I was, but because he was interested in automotive, and he ended up doing the diesel program there, and now works in some NASCAR series in North Carolina. So it definitely put him on the trajectory to his dream job, right? at that time, and since then, the rigor has been increasing under the federal Perkins 5 Act. So it started obviously as Carl D. Perkins, and it over the years has grown and changed. And Perkins 5 requires that every program have multiple IRCs, industry recognized credentials, or 6 college credits, or a mix of an industry recognized credential and a college credit. And so you need to make sure that you are providing all of those things. We have level 1 industry recognized credentials that every student needs a safety one, no matter what program they're in. Most of our students get OSHA 10. We do that really early. A few examples, we have a LIFT program for automotive that they have. The Baking and Culinary Arts does the Serve Safe Managerial, actually. And if a student doesn't achieve that in the first month, then they get the food sanitation or whatever, the lower one. And then we give them the opportunity to still get that managerial level throughout the year. So everybody has to have that. Every student takes the work keys, and we are assessed on whether or not our students achieve literacy in math through the work keys. And if they get a 5 to a 7 in that, they get another industry recognized credential. It's the National Career Readiness Credential. And then each program has their individual components. So this year, our medical professions program has 8 college credits of anatomy and physiology, 1 and 2. Our EMS students, emergency services, they get their EMT, which is 6 credits this year, I think. And plumbing and electrical, they sit for their apprenticeship level 1 exam. And honestly, that's part of the rigor around our attendance policies as well, which some people think are extreme and maybe holding kids a little more accountable. But if a student misses too many days, they can't sit for those exams because there are hours that go with those apprenticeship licenses. So there are a lot of different components depending on what the program that we must meet.
So like a lot of things, other things in education the board's aware of, the regulations have tightened to the point where schools like ours, and even the high school where I was before, which had about 1,800 students in the high school, did not have the expertise or the ability to fund and manage programs, which is why you've seen a growth of CTE programs, and it's why it's become a very specialized area. That it's kind of what we do in a high school is more of a general background, and you just think of your car and what a car was like 35, 40 years ago versus now, and that kind of, to me, is how I think about career and technical education and why we have programs that we send students to and don't have at our own high school, our own local high school.
Any more? Emily, go ahead.
So as I'm listening to this, I do hear and have heard over the years, lots of people saying, how come you don't offer, shop class anymore, things like that. And so from what I'm hearing is that the standards have been raised significantly on these kinds of classes and these kinds of careers that actually provide a higher level of education and quality for students that are looking to get into automotive, electrical, things like that. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that it is the bar has been raised, it sounds like.
The bar has absolutely been raised. And so if you hear people, we still have a few holdouts in some of our sending schools and parents who are really stuck in if you go to career and technical ed, you can't go to college. That's not true. In fact, you can kickstart your college degree with us. In some cases, you can almost get to that associate's degree with us, depending on how long you're with us. So it has changed significantly. I think that is when people ask about our admissions piece and turning students away, that makes it really difficult, right? If you have 60 people vying for 16 seats, and the seat is set by the state. We don't have the same class size rules as you. We have different ones, and it's mostly because of safety. Then you have, what do you do to differentiate between those 60 students to figure out how do you fill, and you try to keep students who are going to be in those 16 seats for the year and who are going to be successful, because that's how we're measured. And if we start to fall down on any of those measures, then we get put on improvement plans, we lose funding, all those things.
Any other questions for Jody? Well, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate what you're doing over there. My own son did the tech program through HCLC here at Harwood, and like your son is a mechanic now in Denver and doing really well because of it. So
Awesome.
it is important. So thank you very much. And for those of you on the board who may not know this, Corey Hackett is our board member on Jody's board. So if you have questions, he's your root in there. Yeah. So thank you so much. All
Thank
right.
you for having me.
Couple of minutes because Jody has to do another meeting virtually and I have to get her set up in a room.
Well, the next item on the agenda, we do not have anyone interested in the seat from Facein as of yet. So we are not going to be doing anything with that. So we're skipping over number 5.
For lack of trying, though, I just want to make that clear.
Not for lack of
Not for lack of trying.
trying. And a lot of, we've all been working on it.
I appreciate you putting it on the agenda, but we're trying.
Yes. Didn't mean to rush you. We're getting there. Yeah. We are also hoping that we're going to hear from Teresa Wood in a little bit. But while we are waiting for that, Teresa Wood, our local rep from Waterbury, I'm wondering if the students have their report. Excellent. So we are going to hear from the students.
Okay, this is the student report for January 14th. You can head on to the next. Please. So we have an update on winter sports. Girls basketball, their record is 4-3-0, we think. Boys basketball is 4-1-0. A bunch of their games have been canceled, so that's why they're not as many games recorded. Girls hockey is 2-6-0. They actually won the first game of their season 11-2, was it? So that is a good jump start for them. And then boys hockey has a perfect record of 7-0-0. Both ski teams are doing great. The Alpine team had a home race this afternoon, and the wrestling team is also off to a great start. Last Thursday, we had a Socrates Cafe held in the library, and community members as well as students participated in a roundtable discussion about the question, how does the passage of time affect our identity? I was there, went very well. Grady, Cash, no?
I wasn't there.
No, yeah.
Well,
Right.
I was.
Yep. Socrates Cafe went very well. And Bobby, you were there, right? Yep.
Did you enjoy it, Bobby? So our Harwood Art Show was held yesterday. Is this still true? All right. And this had work from all the various art classes we offer here this semester. And apparently the art teachers vote on their favorite pieces. And on the pieces with the most votes hang in the hallway for the following semester. New little tradition. I was not aware of that. And we have midterms this week. First time in a while. School gets out at 1 p.m. every day between Monday and Friday, except Monday and Friday.
Well, it's Friday. Friday still.
No, Friday's a full day.
Listen, dude. We have block 7. We have block 7 and then an ELO. So Friday is since
half day.
we have 7 blocks in the overall school. We have 7 classes. So Friday is block 7 midterm, and then a makeup period if you miss the midterm or you need a little more time to work on it. If you don't have anything else to do, you can just leave. So you're out of here by like 10:40. That's for the seniors. I don't know what other grades could do.
Jump back in with my allotted time. Friday is blocked until 3:20. So whoa, I was correct. And
No.
I will not be here the full time.
I can attest it is Not blocked till 3. That's additional makeup exam extended time is needed.
Yes, it's blocked till 3:20. School is not dismissed.
Moving on, next slide. All right, so as the midterms make clear, you good? We are reaching the end of semester 1. So just wanted me to throw in some pictures from across the semester. We've had a very busy semester. Mountain Day, all the fall and winter sports. We had a pep rally, we had a club fair, we had Battle of the Bands, some pictures of students around Harwood. There's been a lot that happened this semester. We've got a busy second semester coming up. Yeah. There is a next slide, but it's not really. It's like a joke. But is there? Does anybody have any questions for us?
I have so many questions.
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like Cashel to explain this picture.
No, this is a real picture I took a month ago at 1:27, I think it was. I do. It was during TA.
Yeah, that's a photo of me.
I actually don't. The SD card is at my house, unfortunately. Any real questions? I know there wasn't a lot that we shared today, but yeah.
I have a question. How is the stock in the food shelf? Is it nice and full? Does it need replenishing? Should we?
This past Monday, there was a crew that reorganized the pantry, and it is full. There's lots of clothes that were gone through, and I don't know if we had said this, but any clothes or food items that don't get taken in a couple weeks, they get moved to the Waterbury food shelf. So
that's great. Good little rotation. Good idea. Okay, good to know. Thank you. Any other questions for the kids? I mean, the young adults, the whatever you want to call them. Yes, no? Okay. Thanks, guys. All right. In terms of board, let's leave that up forever. Yeah. Cindy's, it's stuck up there. Oh, nice. Good move, Grady. All right. In other board reports, Steve, do you want to give an update about our public outreach meeting?
Okay, so the outreach committee met this week, and we kind of have two goals for the immediate future. One, of course, is to get lots of information out about the budget and to get a lot of feedback back from the community. So that's one immediate goal. And the other kind of new goal for this year is advocacy at the state level. There was a really good workshop put on by the Vermont School Board Association this week on just that topic. And I think we're going to jump in, try to talk to our representatives and senators and also other key people in the legislature we feel are sympathetic. So we're drafting that. Now I'm kind of babbling, waiting for my presentation to come up.
I could just chime in for a minute.
Yeah, please.
Cindy and I were able to participate in the webinar, which was excellent, and it's recorded. And I think you can. Well, we were sent links, and I think, and a lot of stuff is on the VSBA website on their homepage with links to different information. The big takeaway that I got from it was we all need to keep up our relationships in the community. And go to where people are. Maybe instead of thinking about having meetings that we schedule, go to other things and show up and be there, which I thought was an interesting idea. We did that a little bit a couple of years ago at the farmers market. And maybe we'll think about that again, having a presence at the farmers market. But going to places when you see events that are happening and being part of those. And additionally, being advocates. We don't all have to agree, and we can speak as individuals, but also, with Ashley and leadership being our spokespeople, generally, those would then become positions of the board. So I just think, it's important that we work together and cultivate our relationships with all different groups, Rotary, the Chamber of Commerce. I thought about that today. Lots of different groups that we could, and then on the different boards that we serve on.
And also, if you get an opportunity and you're in Montpelier to go to the State House, have your lunch at the State House, go to the cafeteria and meet with legislators. You do not have to meet with legislators just from your district. You can meet with you can talk to other legislators. Someone asked about that. So I thought that was a really good kind of reminder that I don't have to find Tom Stevens or I don't have to find Teresa. I can go to somebody else. There's Tom. Tom? So I can look for Tom sometimes. I can see him other places right in Waterbury. But anyway, the point being, and then the other point that they made right near the end of the presentation was that always good to know if there's anybody that's interested in running for the legislature, encourage people to do that, especially people who know something about the issues that we're dealing with in particular. But that either if somebody else on this board was interested in running for the legislature, or if you knew other people who might be, that's another good way to begin to build your support in the legislature. I also thought it was a very good program, by the way.
Right. Should I just run through this quickly? Yeah.
Back to Steve's. Go ahead.
Okay, so if we can just go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay. Yes. We are developing a budget input form because we didn't want to call it yet again another survey. But this will be a short survey. We're going to ask the community to just give us feedback on how much they know about the budget process, which parts are important to them, how can they get more information, and so on. So we're working on that. Hopefully we'll launch that in maybe a week and give people a few weeks to answer. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so how will we use the results from this survey? Well, here we are in the center of the hourglass. We're the school board, and we want to both work with our community and the staff and get feedback from them. That's a kind of double-headed arrow at the bottom. And then we want to use the results of the survey and our own initiatives to contact state officials and make sure they have our understanding of where we see the kind of bottlenecks in educational funding. Sometimes I feel there's a real disconnect between what we deal with on the board and what's being discussed in Montpelier. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So I think we have some well-developed methods for reaching out to the community and getting feedback through the board meetings, through this community input, also the newspapers, Front Porch Forum, and we're also going to have some virtual forums on the budget on February 4th and 19th in the evening. I think we'll send out an invitation so everybody here can be a panelist. And I mean, it's kind of to me, it's ironic, the picture on the bottom showing an engaged community at a meeting. I mean, people don't come to the meetings so much anymore, but because everybody has access to Zoom, it's much easier to go to a virtual meeting, I think. So I think we'll move in that direction. Okay, that's it. Any comments?
Any questions?
Or a comment. Another point that they made today at the advocacy workshop was, or whatever it was, web thing, that virtual, thinking of things virtually, like using social media, that use it for us to use it to our advantage for getting the message out there, because there are people who come to those meetings, and if we can then report on those meetings on a social media page, you expand hugely the number of people who have access to that information, whether it's showing graphs or charts that were showed at a meeting or something like that, but using social media that way. Yeah, like a Facebook page or whatever. I don't know. I thought that was a really good point.
I thought our public outreach meeting was really good, and we had a lot of good ideas. And I'm excited about the forums. I think they will be well attended. We'll be right in the thick of it, and there's a couple weeks between them, so we're hoping we'll get some turnout there. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, go ahead.
If anyone isn't aware, and probably you all are, but if you go to the HUUSD website and you get to the board information, all the board committee meetings and agendas, minutes and agendas are there. And you can take a look and see what you might have missed.
We're even more exciting when we're just recorded than when we're live like this in IRL. Thank you. Tom, would you love to come and chat with us and give us a little update on how things are going? Tom Stevens is here from Waterbury, and Teresa may join us, but it's perfect timing. And if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to hear from you about how it's going up there.
Is that? Hi, I'm Representative Tom Stevens. I live in Waterbury. I used to represent this town, but many moons ago, we got redistricted. So Teresa and I now represent Waterbury, Bolton, Huntington, and Buell's Gore. So,
and I just promoted Teresa, Representative Wood, to panelist, and she should be able to speak. And she should be able to be up. I see her on the screen.
Good evening.
Good evening, Teresa. Thank you for attending. Tom's here too, so your timing's perfect. He's gonna start an update, and you can chime in whenever you're ready. Of all the good news from Montpelier.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
I've represented our district. Now this is my 18th year, and seeing as that we're going to limit our conversation to school oriented topics, this is probably the fourth time I've experienced education reform. And it's just to be clear, Act 73 passed last year. I did not support it in the end. I did not vote for it in the end. I supported it all through the year. I was really impressed with the work that was done by the Ways and Means Committee in particular and the Education Committee. And what was passed out of the House was sufficient. It had the support of superintendents. It had the support of many of the what we call the V's, the principals associations and whatnot. And so when it went to the Senate and when it then came out of the Senate and went into conferences, when I started to lose faith in what was happening, it had turned into something that we thought as House members was a bona fide effort to try to address the parameters that had been set out by the governor. And we felt, there's no denying that when property taxes increase as much as they did 2 years ago, that everybody has to wake up, or not even wake up, but just sit up and see if there's something that can be done. That question, and certainly the focus on lowering class sizes in some districts or student numbers in some districts, but not all. It's really drove a lot of the conversation as well. And so what came out, the reason I didn't support Act 73 at the end was because I felt that the conference committee had been compromised by the influx of different opinions and different ways of cutting that bill up. And listening to constituents, listening to teachers, listening to school board members, it was clear that I couldn't support it, and I voted against it. That doesn't mean that there wasn't good things that were in it. And I think one of the good things, at least from a hopeful standpoint, was the task force that was formed. It was a little strange to have a task force formed in the wake of having a commission whose charge wasn't going to end until recently. But the task force, I'll take a half a step back and say, so this being the third or fourth time of dealing with a massive effort to try to reform the education system I've lived through as a parent. I lived through Act 60 and Act 68, the various and sundry other acts that passed over the years. And the last one was, Act 46, Act 127. These were all attempts to try to bend the curve down in terms of the costs. And even before my time in the State House, there was Act 82, which was the infamous double vote bill, which was to say you were going to get a certain amount of money given to you. And then if you were going to go and do extra on top of that, you had to have a second vote on that chunk of the ballot. That was, again, 19 or 20 years ago that happened. And it was the first major response to 68 and try to say, well, we need to change things up. It didn't last very long. It was very confusing. Everybody, at least in this district, it went away, is enough said. So but for me, Act 46 was a real moment in time because the Act 73 reminds me of Act 46 quite a bit in what it was trying to do. The difference being is that the president administration was in charge to implement that bill and to implement that law, and did what many of us feel was a mediocre to poor job at it. And the Agency of Education is still suffering because of it. There are important positions that are missing that are meant to support you in your work, or small towns that are trying to deal with how are we going to deal with a declining enrollment. And Act 46 was about, Act 60 was about financial equity. Act 46 was meant to be about educational equity so that people across the state had access to similar education, so that people who were getting degrees here, getting their high school degrees here would roughly be have had the same access as Chittenden County towns, and then rural towns would have the ability to have superior teaching. That didn't work out from many different perspectives, and so here we are with Act 73. And to be frank, I thought that the commission or the task force was set up for the most part back in May and June to be a really good idea. And the hope is always that you can come together and close the doors and put your differences or your advocacy for your own particular point of view or who you're representing aside and have a conversation for the greater good. And the fact that it was made up with people who had that in mind, for the most part, I think the report was well done. I did not disagree, because I've gone through enough processes of dealing with, we're 630,000 resident states. There are counties in California that are that big, and they don't have 50 some odd superintendent districts, or districts to deal with. And so, which to me is in the end is irrelevant. It's not just about that. It is about, what are you looking for when you're trying to reform? And I put quotes around that, the system. And some of us believe that it's got to be both somehow. And, I believe that whatever reforms are intended should be meant to say, what are the investments we're willing to make to improve student outcomes when we feel they're necessary. And I think other people have approached reform as, how can we lower property taxes for people and make the schools adjust appropriately? And that's two different ways of looking at it. That's my opinion. It's not, it's not universally held, but that's just the way I feel about how we approach our educational system. So Act 73, the task force issued their report, and which immediately got excoriated by the governor. And he chose to, and then we started our year. So here we are, I'm in January now. And the State of the State address basically was only about Act 73 and was only about education reform. And while the governor chose to say that he didn't want it to be political, he made it political simply by saying that the task force acted politically and was shooting for the status quo, and diminished the fact that what they came up with was essentially what we've all come up with, which is one size fits all, 5 districts. They didn't think it was going to work after hearing from 5,000 Vermonters and after doing the work that they did in the summer and the fall. And they came up with proposals that I'm sure you've read and you'll address, as whether it's voluntary, whether it's not about the districts, it's about working side by side with other districts and perhaps combining resources. And so that's how we started the year for education. It's also in the face of what the December 1st letter proposed, or is guessing based on their research that it's going to be a 12.5% or more increase in property taxes statewide, average statewide. What they didn't clearly say is that half of that is responsible, or half of that is made responsible by the use of the $110 or $20 million last year to pay down people's property taxes without reducing the expenses of education across the state, which is essentially, for some of us, is using the credit card. So if half of that increase was due to paying for something that didn't really exist, and of course we individually didn't see that, we saw that our towns were reimbursed for our share of that money. And so this year, the governor came out in the Budget Adjustment Act, actually back in December. I sit on the Appropriations Committee now, and we are now, dealing with the Budget Adjustment Act, which is to say the boards are good. We have a certain amount of surplus that has come into the state over and above what was intended or what was expected or planned for. And so that money traditionally has been, and it's hard to say traditionally because we just came out of COVID and we're only now getting back to traditional austerity budgeting. So usually with the surpluses in the Budget Adjustment Act, they tend to fill in gaps that were missed the first time with tighter budgets in May and June. And sometimes that will be anything ranging from we underestimated the number of homeless Vermonters, or we underestimated pick anything that you would hope that there would be one-time money put aside to take care of instant needs for people, especially in need. And the governor's director of finance came out and just said, we want this money to be moved to the big budget, and we want it to reduce the property tax again. That puts us in a place of, okay, well, do you as property tax owners, what do you think of that? Do you think if I say, no, I'm not going to support that again, am I going to get reelected? And I don't work that way myself. Certainly makes an effect on the caucus, and it certainly does. It can make an effect on me personally, but it's one of those things. We just did that, and we don't necessarily want to do that again. That may mean that we take care of this 12.5% increase again, or it may be less once all of your budgets are in and voted in. But the feeling overall is right now is being really careful politically and being careful financially, because again, for me, my taxes went up, my property taxes went up. I I worked extra hours during the off season in order to help my household afford the tax rate increase. So I'm not immune to the increase in property taxes. I just don't think that we're addressing it properly, and I don't think we're addressing the needs of the school systems. Everybody can point to health insurance as a huge cost driver, and it's true. You can point to a lot of different factors that you're dealing with every day as you're trying to shape your budget. So we're also wary of spending new money or spending money on new things. We had that with COVID related money, and now we're back to using these surpluses for one-time monies. And I hope we're using them. I hope over the next couple of months, we'll decide how to use them to help people who have been hit hard with what's been going on in Washington, whether it's increase in grocery prices or what have you that we're dealing with every day. The effect of tariffs, the effect of people who are on the exchange if they lose their subsidies. There's a lot of people who are going to struggle with a different kind of affordability than what we've been talking about over the last several years. So that's just the setup for where we are. The education committee is just getting settled in. Representative Wood's committee is dealing with an incredibly difficult human services that she'll talk about in conjunction with what we're dealing with here, I'm sure. And so it's a little too soon to tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I know we're gearing up. I'm gearing up for it to be a very difficult budget year. If the governor holds to his desire to see all $75 million being used to pay down the property taxes again, which will just keep property taxes high next year, no matter what you do, then we may be there a long time, but we're going to do our work. If you know our system, whatever comes out of anybody's committee in the House, in this case, will end up going to the floor. There may be compromises involved there. That's how it works. And then it goes to the Senate and they do their work before it comes back to us, and there's a back and forth. And then the governor has to sign it. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of places where people have to come to some agreement. And what it looks like for me is that it's going to be a pretty long road to get to a place where we find that compromise. I hold out hope always that it will happen. But right now I'm just looking at what's in front of us. We will hear from the governor next week on the budget, which will give us an idea of what else the executive branch is aiming for in their budget. The House will then do the work on the budget. That's the process. And then it'll go to the Senate, and then we will work it out. But of course, you know that it'll be negotiated throughout the year. And the school portion of it, you won't, whatever it is you do, if it passes, the December 1st letter is an estimate. And sometimes it's way wrong. Sometimes it's right on. And we won't know that until after the town meeting day votes. So that's what's going on in Montpelier. Be happy to share the microphone, of course, with Representative Wood, because I'm sure her take is, from where she sits, is also has elements of both light and dark to it.
Sure. Thank you. We appreciate hearing from you. Definitely. Teresa, do you want to chime in here?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I was just going to say, can we switch views so I can see the board, or do I just have to look at Tom, who I see every day? There we go.
I'm
okay.
About the same distance.
Yeah, right. So good evening, everyone. Just because I don't know everyone on the board, I just want to give 2 seconds of background with my experience. As Cindy knows, I served 12 years on a school board in the previous iterations of what school boards look like. I've been through mergers. I've been through building and renovation projects, major ones, and I, was in office as a school board member during Act 60 and 68. So the previous things that Tom talked about. So I have some sense of the trepidation with which, you kind of go into thinking about, what in the world are they going to do in Montpelier? I don't, I can resonate with that trepidation, and there's good reason for that. A couple of things that I want to call attention to is I think probably people have heard about the Senate President's bill proposing, certain things that would, in his estimation, bend the cost curve, et cetera, as well as we have a bill in the House that's been introduced. Both of those bills, I just want you to know, are dead in the water when it comes to the House. We would not advance those as they are presented. And in discussions this evening with the chair of the House Education Committee, I just kind of put forth the question. So are we starting from a place where we're tinkering with Act 73, where we're, going to go full force in the House with the recommendations of the task force? Or are you going to have something totally different? And his response is, we're not starting with any assumptions. And so on the one hand, you might feel like that's a good thing because you might not have liked some of the assumptions that came with Act 73. On the other hand, it leaves the door sort of wide open without much in the way of any kind of predictability and ability to plan. So apparently, from what I understand, the administration is going to be presenting some maps tomorrow, or a map. I'm not sure, which version of that, if it's one or multiple, to the House Education Committee. So you'll get a chance to see, I guess, what the administration's idea is around that at this point in time. Tom talked about the governor's State of the State address, and I can tell you that the General Assembly does not take kindly to threats, and that's essentially what the governor did, was to threaten the state budget, to threaten the yield bill, essentially to hold it hostage until he gets what he wants on education. And so we're going to have to figure out a way to deal with that, quite frankly. And I think that, one of the things that we can do is to be in contact. I know that, the House is moving first on this. What we can do is to encourage both houses, on the House side and then on the Senate side, to act judiciously and to not leave this to the last item on the agenda. So I do not agree with the buy down proposal. I am not a person, Cindy can tell you, I'm not a person who believes on, funding education on credit. And that's exactly what that does. And it only pushes the problem into the next year, which we obviously are seeing this year. So I'm not in favor of that. And are there elements of Act 73 that I believe could be implemented without having to redraw, these arbitrary districts? I believe the answer to that is yes. Whether the governor will acquiesce to that or compromise with that, he seemed to indicate no. He wants to see Act 73 implemented exactly as it called for. And, just to remind people, there were still elements in that bill that require additional work. And one of them that comes to mind, because it involves my committee, is the pre-K aspects of, making decisions about what we're going to do with pre-K. So there are still elements that haven't had any decisions made about it. And given the tenor of the conversation that I had, I would say that, everything is back on the table, even though the governor doesn't want to see everything back on the table. And there are, I think, some people in the Senate who are very protective of independent or private schools, that if they'd be probably happy if things just kept on the way they are and we were sending a bunch of money to private schools. I'm not in favor of that. I think we need to, sort of stop the bleed on money going out to private schools. And I will say, with the exception of those that serve as the public high school, because that's really what we're talking about. So there is a lot to happen between now and the end of the session. And I wish I had something more definitive to offer you, but we really don't. As Tom said, there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of debate. I would hope that there would be some compromise. I'm not sure from the governor's tenor. He didn't really sound like he was interested in compromising. And so how far he really carries that forward is we're yet to find out. And so that's about what I have at this point in time, and happy for Tom and I to take any questions that you have. And I do want to say, if you see Dara Torres, give her congratulations. The reason she wasn't able to be here tonight is because she's receiving an award from the Vermont Conservation Voters. So give her a big congratulations if you see her in the community.
Pharmacist recommended vitamin supplement brand. Does anyone have a question? I want to say I find the governor's hard line attitude really a big turnoff. So I'm glad to hear you say that, Teresa, because it felt so rigid that doesn't feel like a team sport. It feels really like he dictated. So I did not appreciate the state of the state. So
yeah, it was insulting, honestly. I agree. It didn't go over well with most people.
Good. I have to say that. Do we have some questions? Cindy, go ahead.
My question is, in general, when we were talking about the plan to maybe put a cap for 2 years on education spending in 28 and 29, that I want to know if the legislature has any capacity at all anywhere to put a cap on health insurance costs. Or if anybody is making any moves toward that. We hear very little talk about those cost drivers and what either can or can't be done. And I know a lot of it can't be done, but is there anything that can be done? That's my question.
Sure. I'll take a first stab at that. And then, first off, we actually did take a couple of different very concrete steps last session that actually have already had an impact on the rise in healthcare insurance costs. And that's around injectable drugs being used by the hospitals and limiting the upcharge that hospitals have on that. And I don't know if you have heard these statistics, but our major medical center in some cases was upcharging 1,000%. And those kinds of things were going directly to our insurance costs and the bottom line. And estimates are that roughly around an additional 4-point increase would have happened had we not taken that step, that very specific step that went into effect July 1st. And then the Green Mountain Care Board, working with the Agency of Human Services, is looking at reference-based pricing, and they have an implementation timeframe for that. And we have been fortunate to receive essentially it's the current federal administration's attempt at giving back something that they took away with regard to Medicaid and healthcare. So we still have a lot of work to do on that, Cindy. And I think that the biggest thing is being able to make concrete steps like that. And I don't know when the statewide negotiation timeline is up. But I would be interested in any particular feedback about change of composition, change of the charge in the statute, or anything like that you might have that we could actually bring to the Education Committee and maybe get included. I know Tom has had some thoughts about that. Mike's, sorry. I got Tom Lights on my brain, sorry. Mike has had some thoughts about that, and I realize the lack of control that you have over that. But I also think that there needs to be some understanding at that broader level that are we doing everything to contain costs as much as possible? Do there need to be shifts in cost sharing? I'm not involved in that on a day in and day out basis, but I think that if there are things that the statute that we're currently living under are prohibiting from happening that would be beneficial to school districts, then that would be helpful to know from your perspective.
And I'll just chime in and say that we had a testimony today from the head of the Department of Financial Regulation, and the Department of Financial Regulation regulates all of the insurance that exists in the state. They do not control the rates. And so the testimony that we took was actually kind of sobering, because at this point in time, without changes, the basic line is that no matter what we think we can do, the costs of healthcare aren't going down, which is different than health insurance. And and we know Blue Cross Blue Shield got hammered this year. The schools may not be working with Blue Cross Blue Shield, or however the self-insured stuff is. I think Blue Cross Blue Shield does have an administrative piece of the schools' health insurance programs. And one of the disappointing things for me last year was the reveal that Vermonters pay the highest healthcare costs. And when it comes to the exchange, of which there's roughly 70,000 households across the state who have access, who use the Affordable Care Act for their insurance, is at least 4 times higher than New York and New Hampshire. And I have yet to hear any cogent answers yet, and that may be because I'm on a different committee than healthcare or commerce, where the insurance is dealt with. But that's just really sobering. And the losses that Blue Cross Blue Shield has seen over the last several years were related to exchange, the losses due to the exchange, as well as losses due to Medicare Advantage, which was the commercialized version of Medicare. And so these were choices that were made. They weren't necessarily made recklessly. They were, my focus throughout my career here has been to say, what did the exchange do? It increased coverage in the state of Vermont. So over 97% between private insurance and this semi-public insurance, 97% of Vermonters were covered for healthcare, which was remarkable for our state's health overall. So to hear now, especially after COVID, that these are actually losing money for what is essentially the only health insurance provider in the state, again, is very sobering to say, well, how can we change it and turn it down? And to the point that Teresa made about the 4% last year because of the pharmaceuticals, because of the injectable pharmaceuticals. One of my committee mates lives down in Putney, and they went to a legislative breakfast, and one of the people from the hospital was complaining that they could not charge those exorbitant rates because, like anything else, they're charging those exorbitant rates so that they can help make their budget. And it's not necessarily, we can't just write it off to greed. We know that the healthcare industry is as troubled as any place else, but nevertheless, one's own interest, or one small piece of that interest, is saying that whatever was good for people isn't good for us, and there's going to be a conversation about that as we move forward. We're pretty confident that we're not going to change that. And hopefully it will continue to keep that particular line item pretty stable if hospitals can't charge so many different prices for the same drug. So that's the health insurance. I was handed this from the Vermont School Boards Association, and I was aware, at least not for the last 2 or 3 years, but aware of the incredible increases in health insurance and what it means for all of us as school boards, but as taxpayers as well.
I want to mention one thing that is unprecedented in the time that I've been around, at least as a person interested in these issues, is we have the state's major health insurer, Blue Cross Blue Shield, actually having a public information campaign encouraging people to use cheaper healthcare services. In other words, services other than UVM Medical Center, smaller hospitals, independent, imaging places, surgery centers. It was actually, I don't really know how I feel about it, to be honest with you, but I thought it was a pretty unprecedented attack on the major medical center, which, we all need to be a strong medical center as well. But if we lose Blue Cross Blue Shield, that's an even bigger problem. So I just thought it was interesting that people sometimes don't realize that they have choices in healthcare and where they receive healthcare, and that there are major differences in the cost of that healthcare, particularly as it relates to hospital services.
And Cindy, to your question originally, I mean, you were asking specifically about capping healthcare, and I think the answer is, I'm not sure we can cap anything. But even the capping, the proposals, there's two. There's one in the House from a representative from Barry Town, and then there's the one that's proposed by the Senate Pro Tem from Burlington. And what strikes me is if you cap something and that the answer is we're only going to send you X amount of dollars from the education fund, so you only have to set a tax rate that's going to help the whole state reach that number, but the rest of it's going to come out of the general fund. It brings back this memory to me of the Act 82 that I was talking about, which said we're going to give you X amount of money, and if you want to have any more, you get to vote on it yourself. But by saying that it's going to take it from the general fund, it is almost, is my opinion. So I don't have the homework done on it, but it's my opinion that it's an attempt to legitimize the use of the surpluses to pay down the property taxes rather than the lowering of what the expenses might be, which is really the only way that you can lower the taxes the way the system's set up. Act 73 has other proposals that are kind of tied into districts or how the redistricting would work out, but they're years down the road as well. So these proposals to try to cap property taxes at some certain level, again, how would you have capped something if just this expense of health insurance went from $36,000 to $41,000 or $44,000 projected for the next 2 years? Where would that money come from? We're not also proposing to put what used to be called, or what was once called, a Snelling surcharge, where people at the highest end of the income range had a 3 or 5 year tax or fee or surcharge put on their incomes back in 1990 in order to deal with the recession. That hasn't been proposed by anybody. It's like, so to think that we're going to find that amount of money in the existing budget the way it stands now is short-sighted, to be polite.
Thank you for the update. Thank you both. Thank you, Teresa. Does anyone have any more questions for these guys? Because we have a budget discussion ahead, which this will actually help us with. So we do appreciate hearing from you. It's put stark clarity on the conversation we're about to have. So any other questions?
I appreciate all of your work and all of your service. I know that it's hard to keep people on the board and keep a certain continuity for this board. But I have to say, as someone who would never, ever want to be on this board, that I appreciate your time and your energy in trying to help figure this out. And in the face of, we're doing the same thing, and we don't, I think one of the things that people in general, not just in Montpelier, but people in general don't realize that our property taxes, 80% of them are for education, our local property taxes.
It's crazy.
And only 20%. Well, this is that's the normal breakdown, right? Is roughly 80% of your property taxes. And then obviously education money comes from other sources as well. But you all locally have to deal with the fact that 80% of the property taxes that you pay go to education and 20% go to your town. That's not the same in Montpelier. That's not I mean, we have to deal with different things, but it's not 80% of the money that we take in, though, given the way it's going, it could be. So I just really want to say that you probably don't hear it from people in Montpelier enough, but really appreciate the work that you have to do day in and day out to get this budget done every year. So thank you.
Thank you. I do have my one board member who's in Zoom does have a question. Go ahead, Ben.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'm just wondering, you mentioned New Hampshire and you mentioned New York, and I'm thinking about those populations as compared with Vermont populations. And in terms of thinking about insurance, right, being not just an incidental to the whole puzzle of fixing the education system, but really being the engine that's driving the problem of the education system. I'm wondering how to help best solve the problem of Vermont's healthcare system to then solve the problem of the education system. And one of the things that sort of comes to mind is our aging population. And we essentially have statewide, right, the population of a mid-sized city spread across an entire state. And of that, we have a pretty sizable aging population. Would it be uncouth of me to suggest that the state really look at the exemptions, the tax exemptions that are in place for aging populations to continue to be exempt from school taxes?
They're not exempt. Whoops, sorry.
That's all right. But they are if they're under a certain threshold. And so that we can begin to see some movement in the housing market, so that we can begin to see some movement in terms of families coming in. And the change up of that, right, then changes the insurance market. It sees people who don't necessarily need to have, they're paying full insurance, but aren't needing the insurance necessities that older folks are needing 24/7. And that creates a more robust population. The problem really is the state of Vermont, right, in having a population of, say, 600,000 people is balancing on a very, very thin line. So when you are talking about any sort of extreme of anything, it's going to affect many different levels. So it's something to consider. That when you're talking about healthcare, you're looking at the drivers of what's causing that healthcare spike, and then how to address those spikes. So I bring that out to you as legislators. And if it's not that, I'm sure it's something else. But how to address those spikes is, I think something to address as a state and to not look at it so siloed. And I am. As a Republican, I am disappointed in my governor's sort of heavy-handed view of things, as well as some of the things that are coming out of the State Board of Education and their view of things, because It's really the cost drivers are really being given to us by the healthcare industry. So I thank you for your time, and those are some ideas that I have.
Thank you, Ben. I just wanted to add my thanks to the board for the invitation to come to the meeting this evening, and again express my appreciation for the work that you're doing. And healthcare is a major driver, but Ben, I guess I would disagree that it's the only driver. When I look at it, it might be the key driver for this school district, but as a state, we do have classrooms with 2 kids in them. That's a big cost driver as well, and understanding that inequity that exists across the state, and that we have a system that where decisions about spending are made locally, and it's a statewide funding system, and there is a disconnect there that we have to figure out how to solve. So I agree, healthcare is a major cost driver. It's just I don't agree that it's the only cost driver affecting education. That's all. So again, my thanks for the invitation this evening, and we're happy, or I'm sure Tom is too, but I don't want to speak for him. Happy to come back at a later time as things progress during the session, and thank you for your continued engagement in the process.
And in my last response to Ben is not a response in general. Those are all drivers of the culture that we live in, and we're aware of them. There are many facets to every conversation that we have. Years ago, somebody told me that they see the world in black and white, and I had to respond by saying I see it in shades of gray. And so to say that it's one thing or another depends on the day, quite frankly. And but to the point of the aging population, I'm unfortunately for myself 64 years old now, and I am firmly in the very end of the baby boomer thing. Anybody who's 61 or older is a baby boomer. And there's a lot of us, and we are going to drive a lot of the costs for care and health care and health insurance over the next 25 years anyway. And so what we need to do as a state is to take that into consideration and see that this bubble exists, but someday it's going to be gone. And who knows what's going to be at the end of that. It's not going to be a rainbow for sure. But again, thank you so much for having us in. And yes, schedule permitting, I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Thank you very much. And we appreciate you coming, both of you. And we would love to hear from you again as things progress. That would be great. We'll be in touch. All right. Have a great night. Thank you very much. Okay. That was very enlightening. We are moving on to our budget discussion. So we have Lisa's presentation with revisions, bringing it up a week forward for the snapshot. I'll hand it over to you, Lisa.
A lot of these slides are similar slides that I had presented earlier, but just always one in case we have new people attending the board meeting. I'll go over them quickly. Can everybody hear me? Okay. This is the list I'll be going over quickly. I don't need to read out the list. Often, I know it's come up at the board meetings of what's actually required, and what I thought for a basic, I would put in here what schools are required to fund. So instructional services, special education, many of these are mandates, student support services, and then, of course, operations and infrastructure. Next slide. Actually, you can go right to the next slide after that. Cost drivers. A slide I've shared with you before. These are our cost drivers. Healthcare is not our only cost driver. We have contractual increases. Those are the contractual ones that total that amount for the CBAs. And so we have more than just healthcare costs for our district, which this year was a projected 3.1% increase. Next slide. I've shared 72% of our, actually almost 73% of our budget is personnel costs. a good portion of that is dictated by multi-year collective bargaining agreements. And then also I just point out that, again, of that $10.9 million of benefits, $6.3 million of that is actually our healthcare costs. Other things in there are other benefits, workers' comp things, life insurance, all of that. That's what makes up the difference. Quickly, next slide is, I've shared this. This is our operational costs. So $14.8 million actually runs the district and our 7 campuses and the central office.
And I did want to note, Lisa and I talked about this. Athletics, for example, since it's the first one, I'll pick on athletics. That is only kind of the operational piece. It's not the personnel costs with stipends for coaches. So that is from the previous slide. So some of these numbers are that don't show the full cost of operating, for example, an extracurricular program.
Right. So I just want to refer that, and this is, I've mentioned this before, anything that I consider above the line is salary and wages and benefits, and anything below the line is operational costs. So these operational costs are below the line. Coaches, official salary, coaches' salary are not included in this. I wanted to actually do a snapshot over the last 2 years. I've included fiscal year 25's. The first couple of lines are the expenses of the district. So I included the budget and the actual and the forecasted or the proposed for fiscal year 27. You'll see below that is the revenue that we've brought in actual revenue over the last couple of years, and then what I'm projecting for fiscal year 27. And you'll see our expenses need to always match our revenue, and that's where we're at. So with the recommended reduction of the $1,036,000, it would bring us down to a 5.4% year-over-year increase. Next slide. I just wanted to give you a kind of a snapshot of that revenue and give you, most of it is basically our educational spend that we request the state to fund our district. And then the next large portion, which is 13% or $6.8 million, is our special education block fund, what's called a mainstream block funding grant that we get in to support our special ed. Next slide. I've shared this. This is the weighted student count comparison. Our numbers, we did lock our numbers in as we talked about at the last board meeting. We are locked in at 2625.05 LTWADM. Which actually results in only a reduction in our weighted head count of 34.67. And if you remember, our overall reduction, not including PK, is 22. Including PK is 27. So we're pretty close to our weighted to our actuals. Next slide. I just wanted to throw this in, and we talked about, what do we actually have control over? And I mentioned at the last budget meeting our lunch counts and, possibly leaving money on the table and not getting our lunch counts back. If you recall, initially, we had the V1 of the LTW ADMs. If you recall, our free and reduced lunch number dropped significantly. It was roughly around 328 or 368 counts. And then we put this massive email out to be able to have people go up, and Mike can talk about this a little bit, but to go online and get certified. That number jumped over a 2.5-week period from 368 to 481. And last year, our number was 502. So what I wanted to, so that little push jumped our number in 2.5 weeks, which actually increased. We dropped, remember initially weighted was 147 down. Now we're only down 34 weighted counts. So what I wanted to see is, okay, if everything else were the same, what it would look like if we do another push in the future to make sure that, if we get families to go and get certified. If we had 100 additional families being qualified for a free and reduced lunch, our number would increase. So our weighted average, if everything else was the same and comparing apples to apples with just 100 qualified families, the free and reduced lunch, and I apologize, there's a typo, it says FPL, it should be FRL. If we just put that to 581.40, you will see our LTW ADM weighted cost per weighted average for cost per pupil is $2,728 versus $2,625. That number, our cost per pupil, actually changes from what our number is. And I'm giving you a little bit of a heads up because I was actually able to even tweak our number because we were close to 240. Now I'm actually close below the excess spending threshold of 406. So I'm kind of giving you a little surprise before I share that with you. But in looking at this comparison, the difference for our cost per pupil would drop significantly. We would be over $1,000 under that excess spending threshold. That cost per pupil for $15,457 would be less than our current year's cost per pupil. So that's just something to think about. Things that we have control over, meaning marketing, making people aware.
I'll bet you that most people do not realize that this data is used for anything of this significance, because I know I didn't, and I will throw myself under the bus. I forgot about that survey. So you'd only need 99 if I had.
And I will say the other point, Lisa and I were talking about this today, is when the state changed 2 years ago with Act 127 to the new weighted pupil count, that shifted. They did not, the legislature did not expand the pie of money available. They shifted the burden. So if you were a district like us that had fewer students who were poverty students, fewer EL students, it shifted the burden so that communities like ours with higher wealth but less students who are in need, we had a greater tax burden and less available for our funds. That's why we've been, I've said we've been squeezed the last 2 years. That's one of the reasons we've been squeezed, and it's not a criticism, but it was a policy choice from the legislature that's resulted in some of the challenges, all the challenges we're facing right now.
Is this number of 100, is this kind of a suspicion that you have that there's 100 more families out there?
No, I just made it easy just to say what, and to keep in mind the weight is only 1.03, so it's not a heavy weight. So, but that 100 more families, because if you think we actually went from 368 to 481 in 2.5 weeks.
Is it mandated how we collect that data? Like right now, the assumption is that you're not FRP unless you show otherwise, but could you flip that and assume that everybody is unless you show you're not?
Well, if I say it's highly regulated, will it surprise you if I say that? It is all also wrapped up in the National School Lunch Program and regulations that the state has to file. Even though our state has implemented universal meals, they still get reimbursement from the federal government. So the system they have, we're not a universal meal program. There's some schools, because of their percentages, that every student gets prior to university meals, every student would have gotten a free lunch, and that still applies because the state still gets reimbursement as of 2 minutes ago from the federal government. But we have to, because of the category we're in, we have to use the online form that we share out through registration every summer. It's an income verification form. So that's one way that the state can verify that a family qualifies as a free and reduced lunch category. There's also another process that if we have families who are unemployment or Medicaid or other kinds of programs under other kinds of reimbursement programs, that also comes electronically through that system to us to categorize it. So that's why I mentioned last week we have a data person who spends his days looking at screens and making sure all of our information in PowerSchool is properly categorized, because everything happens electronically now. From us to the state, from other agencies to other agencies, and then from those agencies to the state. So we can't even use, we had some principals, we used to use paper forms. There used to be free lunch forms. And we had some principals who asked me, why, this number went down when when central office decided to start using the electronic forms rather than the paper forms. And I had to mention to them that that wasn't a central office decision. That was a state regulation and a change in how we implement the processes and verify. But it has made it moving to universal meals has made it more challenging because people just don't quite understand that connection anymore, and why we have to ask them to fill out that form. And there's other people who contacted me who said, Mike, people I know, and you're like, I'm reluctant to fill this out because I think this is how you're going to get my property taxes to increase. People are very suspicious of those systems, but that's what we have to do.
A specific form that they fill out relative to lunch issues. Is that correct? And how do we decide who gets that? Is that from the income thing? You said that we got a whole bunch more, that people hadn't filled it out and hadn't sent it in. So does that get sent to everybody who makes that qualification level based on our income information? Or what I'm saying is there some way we could be sending that out to everybody and just say
we do. So what we did, and you wouldn't, because you weren't on the parent email, you wouldn't have received it. But every year we ask parents to verify information enrollment, and we send it out to every family. And one of the forms you fill out is this. We ask you to fill out is this form. It takes you to the state's website, so we have no way of verifying who has and has not completed that process. And then what I did 6 weeks ago is I put a big push and sent that out again, saying, if you have not filled this out, it has impact on funding and taxes. So please fill it out if you have not done so already.
But for the next year then, or the next time we do that, we can send that out with that. No, it can go separately from the stack of things that people have to fill out or whatever. The confusing, is there at some point that we can send out the meal thing with that information that it affects our budget?
Bunch of new learning recently around this. So I just, I had no idea, and talking with folks from the state and also working with this team. And so there's there's a way for people to be, directly certified, a direct certification, and that has to do with any sort of programs that they are eligible for through the state. It's families, right? So if a family is eligible for 3 squares, they would be directly certified through the state. We don't have anything to do with that. What we found is that we had less kids who were directly certified from the state, and so we had to collect additional information, which is then reviewed by the state because it's a state form. And that's how some of our numbers went up, because some families actually meet the threshold for free and reduced lunch and maybe don't know they meet the threshold for other state programs. So we caught some more, families, and we're able to help our number. It is something that everybody's asked to do as part of registration. Registration is all online now, so it's a click away. What it isn't easy to do is do on your phone. And that is how many families try to complete the registration, because that is their device. And so we're working with the state being like, can we make this easier? And it's really about income. It really doesn't, they're not talking about lunches anymore, because lunches are universally given to kids. So there's confusion. I was so confused, admittedly, that I'm really glad that I was able to kind of find my way through this. But there's many kind of checks and balances around that, and we just have to make sure that we're asking folks to do that part, because they might not qualify for other programs, but might be identified as a as a family that would meet this criteria. I don't know if I helped at all, but I'm doing a lot of learning around this myself.
Okay, this question doesn't have anything to do with lunch. I'm sorry about that. Lisa, I know there's a great slide. So is the 7-cent reduction in the district tax rate driven by our relation to the yield number and our cost per pupil spending? So if we lower our cost per pupil spending, our yield number goes down and thus our property taxes go down.
So the higher the yield, the lower the tax rate. The lower the yield, the higher the tax rate. Yes.
So the state sets the yield number, and then that's how much they say each student should cost. And if we're below that, we pay. I'm trying to understand yield. I did my research on yield. It's still very confusing. I just, for this slide, not to get too deep into it.
Right.
Because you bring the cost per pupil spending down so much, we pay 7 cents, 100 less.
Right.
Even though the amount of money we spend is the same. We
Right.
just pay less taxes because they give us more money. Is that what it comes down to?
Right. And just, I want to make a codicil to this slide. So this is just ADMs, so remember that LTW ADM is made up of weights. So what I'm showing here, just to make the slide simple, is ADMs, and then the equations, I didn't, if you add all this up, it won't add up correctly, because what I'm sharing with you is that this is ADMs, and then I plugged in what the weighted LTW ADM would be, and then how it calculated to the actual pupil count.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, if we get more English language learners, that would also reduce our per pupil spending because we'd have a larger LTW ADM.
Yes.
And then that would also lower our district tax rate.
Correct.
It's not just about free and reduced lunch. It's about checking all of these boxes. And as we lower our cost per pupil and get to the relation of the yield, not where it goes, that's what sets our tax rate.
Correct. If you go back one slide, Mike, you'll see the different weights for all the different categories of students. So English language learners are weighted at 2.49, and our free and reduced lunch or economically disadvantaged, I have a typo in there too, FPL, is 1.03. So yes, the more you have of the larger weights, our LTW ADMs go up, and our cost per pupil goes down.
So I asked Lisa to start putting some examples in. So I'll give another example. It's not written, but we could, if Harwood had a $50 million budget and we had 2,000 students, I'll make it easy. Maybe we have 2,000 students sitting in our seats. And with weights, we had 2,500 seats. And we're sitting next to the new school district. And the new school district has the exact same number of students sitting in seats. They have the exact same budget, but they have higher student needs. So they have more free and reduced lunch. They have more English language learners. They have more secondary students. Both those districts that have the exact same number of kids in them and the exact same budget would have different costs per pupil.
No, I got you on that one. Totally get that.
Yep. And because they had different costs per pupil, then you take the yield divided into your cost per pupil, and that's what generates the tax rate. So they would have, the new school district would have a lower tax rate than we have. And that's how the formula works.
Or
sort of.
Doesn't.
Yes.
Thank you for that information.
So I just wanted to clarify the next slide. When we're talking about universal meals, 100 additional families, we're not talking about 100 additional families filling out the form. We're talking about 100 additional families that qualify, right? So we might have to have 500 people fill out the form. And I do fill out my forms every year.
But that's per pupil, right? If you have 3 kids in your family and they're all, so we get 3 times 1.03. So one family, 5 kids or whatever, that's a multiplier. So you say it's 100 more individuals. It could be 20 families with 5 kids.
I'm just talking about when we fill out the forms. It doesn't equate 1-to-1 is what I'm saying.
That's why I put qualified. Qualified.
Okay, so I want to sort of bring this back into some of the budget stuff that we've been talking about when it comes to preschool, and clearing up a misconception that I saw in one of the concerns from community members about if people were paying for lunch, could that help with the budget? And then a misunderstanding from some community members, I think, that everybody gets free lunch, whether or not you qualify for free and reduced lunch. So that's not an option of something to make a reduction in the budget, and that we are actually trying to get more students to eat the food in our schools, because as a school district, we actually make money on that by getting a reimbursement. So I just wanted to remind ourselves and community members watching that as we're talking about this, a reminder about how the lunch programs work, but then also not realizing myself as a board member, the impact to our budget of getting families to fill out paperwork to find out if you did have to, in fact, pay for your lunch. Here are the families that qualify for free and reduced lunch, and that actually helps our overall budget, the more families that fill that out and indicate that they would have the need if they had to be paying for lunch.
So one thing I just want to clarify is what you said is that we earn revenue. We don't earn revenue on that money. It's a reimbursement from the state, and we're reimbursed based on actually what's eaten rather than what's purchased. So that's why when the kids go through the lines, we have to click for every meal to say that was eaten, taken, or, picked up. No, just the meal, the breakfast or the lunch. So it's not that we're earning revenue. We're still purchasing that food no matter what. It's whether we get reimbursed. And it's $7.15 a day for that meal.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Well, given the significance of this, is there any way to publish what the threshold is, so families could then say, "Oh, I didn't know." Because that would be the same for the tax assistance too. We talked about that people that are income eligible may not be taking advantage of that tax assistance.
It's not as easy as that because it depends on how many members of a family. It depends on eligibility around other things. Like it would be really nice if it was just, if you make under this amount, you're good. It's not as quite as that simple, unfortunately.
Could we make a recommendation to the state that they make an app for the phone so that people could actually fill it out? Because that seems crazy to me. A lot of people just have a phone. They're not in luxury land with a phone, with a computer. So that seems like low-hanging fruit. No, not up to my. And I mean, there is something to be said for publishing around this fact, writing about this, just so for us to figure out the need and how our students to weight them properly. We need people to fill this out, even though you're getting it and you don't have to. I mean, that for me as a person who hates filling out forms, if I don't think I need it, I'm not filling it out. So I would now, based on that. Okay, moving on.
Okay. So you've seen this slide before, but I kind of blew my little surprise that I've actually brought us more under the excess spending threshold, because it doesn't change our overall expense number, but because I was able to tweak my revenue, we had, we do an early special education plan, some things changed, and I have possibly more students that are going to exceed that excess spending threshold, which was raised this year to $68,668. Every year it's gone up. The first year I was here, it was 50,000. Now it's at 68,000, and I'm here 4 years, so it's gone up that much over the last couple of years. So I was able to tweak the revenue a little bit, which I'm thrilled to say that we're now $406 below the excess spending threshold. So, which because of our cost per pupil has now dropped to $16,063.52, and then you work through, you take the yield, the projected yield of $8,849 divided by our cost per pupil, you get our estimated adjustment. And then remember, we have that taxing capacity discount with the state adjustment. We only have 2 more years of that left. It's up to almost 7 cents. But now instead of $1.76, we're at $1.74. So it's only a year-over-year increase of 2.7% on our homestead district tax rate, which I'm thrilled. Next slide.
Can I ask who sets that threshold for the special ed, that 68,000?
The state. The state does. Mm-hmm. And we're just given that every year.
And then for the amounts over it, are we reimbursed by the feds? If we go over that amount, we're reimbursed 95% by the feds or the state?
A combination of pass-through through the state. So it comes from it's a reimbursement from the state to me. And if you recall, 3 years ago, they changed it. There's an extra percentage. So there's a complicated formula. But we have to, once we get over that threshold of 68,668, we get 95% of that. And then they compare it to another metrics. And if we exceed that metric, we get an additional 5% of that overage. So sometimes we could get up to almost 96, 97%.
And I don't want to get too deeply into this, but why is it in this state's interest to raise that amount from 50 to 68,000? They don't have to.
And prior to that, it was 50,000, and it was for 50,000 for many, 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 many years. Mm-hmm. And then it's going up every year now. So I want to move on quickly. So this is the efficiencies, the district efficiencies that we talked about that is included in this reduction of $1,036,000. Next slide. I just wanted to share a 5-year budget comparison in terms of what our budget is, our overall increase, and what inflation has been estimated for fiscal year 27 and prior years. So we're pretty much in line with year-over-year increases. On average, for the trailing 4-year average, we're at 5.0% increase, and this year we're at 5.4% increase with our reduction. What I want to just is what our district tax rate would be, $1.74, a 2.7% year-over-year increase. I do have the CLAs. They actually are finalized now. These are what the projected CLAs are, but things can change. Remember, things can always change. The yield is not set, so things can change. So this is always estimated. Next slide. So looking ahead, what if? So what could happen? What happens in the future? There are a lot of what ifs. Next slide. Possibilities of deeper cuts would be impacting student programs, student experiences, instructional and academic opportunities, instructional technology. We would move during COVID. We were able, with ESSER funding, we were able to purchase one-on-one devices for all of our students. We would move back from that because right now we have to overturn them and purchase new ones. So instead of 1-for-1, we would move to a 2-to-1 device in from K through 5. That could achieve $100,000 savings. Remember, this is what ifs. This is not part of our $1,036,000 reduction. And then possible additional reduction of student activities and transportation. Next slide. Student activity transportation, I'm sorry.
Yeah, what does that entail? Like, what does that kind of umbrella mean? Yeah, is that like sports or is that?
It's a lot of things in there. It could be field trips. It's, and not the mainstream busing, but co-curricular field trips, activities bus, there's sports buses. So it's just a number that's there that would be looked at.
Right. Thank you.
What slide are we on now? Future planning for beyond fiscal year 27. So this is a list that you asked us to develop, that the list that we would look at for the future that could not be done in fiscal year 27. But it was a list that we would need to be looking on beyond fiscal year 27 because of planning. It would take time for planning. Next slide.
And one of the things I would say is like the first one, and Teresa mentioned this, her committee is looking at the Act 166 funding and whether they expand Act 166 in pre-K programming. And I've had, I'm sure no surprise, I've had a lot of discussions with teachers, with parents, and I had someone today who was very familiar with the system who made the comment to me, well, the money we receive for pre-K comes from the state and it's not part of our local budget. And I had to let the person know that, no, that's not the case. With Act 166, the local budget and then the education fund is what funds our pre-K programming. So, and it also includes the private pre-K providers that we have. Some parent families take advantage of private just because it's in many cases more convenient because everything is kind of a one-stop shop, and that all comes out of our local budget. So if there's any changes, ramifications, that would come out of the budget. So I've had, unrelated to our discussions with pre-K, I've had a lot of it's come up a lot with superintendents and conversations I've had in the last week, and it runs the gamut. There's some school districts that only go with the private reimbursement model. I was talking to a superintendent yesterday who that is all they have available. I was talking to another superintendent who they provide full-time pre-K programming. But again, all of those are dependent upon local makeup, local structures, and also dependent upon it's financed through their local budget and local taxes.
So I just wanted to point out that when we talk about this is not our ugly list. The ugly list is if we can't pass our budget, what can we get done this year? That would be for future. Okay.
And this is something we spent an hour and a half with our principal team last Thursday. We have another meeting it was Monday. On Monday, it's been a busy week. It feels like about 2 weeks in this first 3 days. But we've gone through. We've started to identify what areas, and even this year, you start looking at wholesale program elimination. We have done the best we could to make impacts without directly eliminating programs. The only real exception we had is we did reduce the elementary foreign language program 2 years ago, but we still have the middle school foreign language program. We still have a robust high school program, and meanwhile, there's been districts around us who have eliminated into all those areas. So I'm not saying that's on our list, but what we're working on is what are based on enrollments. We've asked elementary, middle school, and high school what we could do, and we are doing some operationalization to kind of decide what those pieces are in a realistic way. And if something were to happen and the budget was not adopted and the board, whether the board went out again with the same amount or asked us to make reductions, we would have a list for that next one. But I can promise that it's not going to be things that we've, for the most part, not had a lot of public clamor over the last 2 years for the reductions we've had. We've tried to do it as painlessly as possible. I would anticipate with the things that we're going to have to bring, because we have done a lot of that reduction to this point, I would anticipate we will have full rooms of people with the kinds of lists we would have to bring.
Next slide. So the next steps would be developing long-range frameworks with the Building and Visioning Committee, Building Use and Visioning Committee, looking at, and developing impact considerations. Planning is key. Long-range planning has to be implemented. And what do we do beyond fiscal year 27? So those are the things that we'll need to start working on now to be able to be prepared for the future.
For if our budget fails, are some of those items, of those 3 or 4 items, to do with maintenance and would we be looking at cutting back on some of the maintenance mostly maintenance?
Yeah, so these maintenance would not be included in this list. It would be what's in this list in those categories. And then those are the things that are, right now maintenance is bare bones. We've cut our contingencies back. There's really nothing left to cut. I hate to say this, but there is no fruit left on the trees. Yes. Yeah, we have cut the maintenance over the last 3 years. We're doing bare minimum. We're not investing in our buildings, and that's hurting us in the future because it's adding to our deferred maintenance list. And as you recall, in this budget, we're only carrying over $500,000 to go in our maintenance reserve. So right now we have approximately $2 million in our maintenance reserve with 500,000 going. So we'll have 2.5 million, but it's an ongoing process, and we'll be bringing to you in February what we're planning for the summer with that funding, and it's being eaten up quickly. I know Ray has already come to me and says, Lisa, I have needs next year more than $2.5 million. And then we have to prioritize. And that's what we're going to bring to you in February and recommend. But again, as you recall, we've always carried 1.6 million, then $1 million. Now we're down to below 500,000. And we're cutting our operational budget, and our deferred maintenance is just adding. Mm-hmm.
Can you give us the thoughts, how you got to the preschool hubs and how you landed where you did? Just some of the considerations that got you there?
We haven't made the final announcement yet, but I would anticipate that's going to happen very soon. But we looked at a number of factors. We looked at geography of the district, what makes sense there, where are the current student centers, what buildings are looking at enrollment for next year, what buildings have capacity to have in their building a partner organization. And there's a lot of variables. And I've had some conversations, a lot of conversations, and said that the options really are status quo, which we know is not, when you look at our budget, it's not really an option, or to make the best decision that our administrative team can, with the information we have, with the lens we're looking through, knowing that if whatever three schools we chose, there would be people who would say, and would have some good points, that there are other arrangements we could choose. So there's not going to be a perfect solution. The perfect solution, well, there really is a perfect solution. It's more funds, more revenue, and maintain programs in all buildings. So that they were some of the lenses, and we've been working on a letter that we will send out that has more details about the information we have. And no matter what we do, there's going to be impacts to families. You have some rooms that are really nice, some rooms that are a little larger than the others, some that aren't. And there is, again, no easy answers. I shared with the board earlier this week some of the information. Part of Act 73 is minimum class sizes. What I didn't share explicitly, some of you asked me about that, is that pre-K and kindergarten are excluded from that minimum class size. Our number for our buildings is 15. That's a number that we have set that we feel is a reasonable number for, the maximum number that you could have for a pre-K program. And with the current numbers, we would have some buildings next year without changing anything. We could have some buildings that would have 5, 6, 7 in a session. And where I think it gets challenging for the board is when you look at that equity lens, and that's why I pointed out the class minimums, because one of the things that our families in Brookside did without a lot of public concerns raised was we went from 4 per grade to 3 per grade in a building that has scale. So it's going to be, from an equity standpoint, it's going to be hard moving forward saying that we have 5, 6, 7, 8 students in pre-K, when this year we're looking at students in actual class counts. We have classes of 18 and 19 first graders at Brookside. And that's going to get more challenging when you look at kind of the population balance. And one of the challenges we have there is we have buildings of scale and some buildings that are smaller. So as we move forward, then there's all kinds of complications that we've been talking about. Intra-district choice, which has worked really well for us. It's been a really good thing for families. But for example, I was going over enrollment numbers with the principal at Moortown today, and we're looking next year. They do multi-age classrooms to balance out class size. So next year we're looking at classes, and correct me if I'm remembering my numbers wrong, Mandy. I was talking to Mandy about it. We're looking at 23 and 21. It was 44 in the class next year, and a number of those are intra-district choice, and it puts us at a number where it would be larger class sizes. So do you have a grade level of 2 or 3? It really is above what we like to have in first and second grade at 21 and 22. But some of those families are coming from other parts of the district that are going to have classes that are in the teens. So it's not an easy piece to look at when you're looking at it behind the scenes, as we are with principals and making those decisions at the time. It's going to be harder. We're going to look more intensely at what we say yes to for intra-district choice, because we don't want to have one class at 23, which is what is going to happen while we have other buildings in the district at 14. Mandy, do you have any thoughts?
I was just going to add one thing, Mike, to what you said, is that last year we had 13 preschool sessions in our district. This year we have 11. And when you take that number 15 and you look at capacity, we're below 80% capacity, even with 11 sessions. And with less kids coming next year, we're running small classes, and we've had the capacity to have more kids join us. So.
No, I just wanted to say thank you. I get some of that. I think there's obviously, we're hearing a lot of concern from people in the preschool preschool reconfiguration. I just think it goes to show that, in an ideal world, we'd want pre-K at every school, but we're not living in that type of world right now. So, and we get this information at a board level, and we digest it, but we have we have to trust the administration, the principals, the superintendent to make the decisions being in the school. So I thank you for that.
I just want to thank everyone for all the work they've done with all this pre-K stuff. And I've been racking my brain for the last, it's been a week since our last meeting to figure this out. Looking at all the facets, I've spoken to a number of people about pre-K, and it's basically come to my attention that, yeah, we don't have enough kids. We have reduced enrollment, and 3 preschool hubs make sense. And I am the Facein rep, and Facein is on the chopping block. There's no doubt about that. But I guess my perspective has changed, and I'm really just looking to make sure that we're giving the best possible instruction in the best possible classrooms to the kids in the Valley. It's not about keeping Facein. It's not about keeping Warren. It's not about keeping Moortown. It's not about recreating Waitsfield. I don't know much about Brookside. I think Brookside's got it under control up there. So I'm really focused on the Valley, and I think that's fair. I look at the enrollment that we have this year in Facein, and we only have 9 3-year-olds and we have 14 4-year-olds. But of those people, our 4-year-olds, we have 8 that are coming from Facein, but we're covering 4 people from Warren, and we're covering 2 from Waitsfield in our 4-year-old class. In our 3-year-old class, we've got 4 kids from Facein of a total of 9. 1's from Warren, 3's from Waitsfield, and 1's from Rochester. Those kids have to go other places. It's not just Facein. And next year, you're right. We only have 6 3-year-olds coming into Facein if we kept that pre-K open, and that's not enough. That's not enough for quality of education. It's not really there. But we do have those 4-year-olds that are going to move up, and that'll be 3 from Waitsfield, 2 from Warren, 1 from Rochester, and 4 from Facein. So we're not really serving just Facein kids. And the other abnormality is if you look at the number of kids, we currently have 69 that are attending private pre-K at a cost about $27,000 a month, which is cheaper than educating them in the public preschools. And I see that is a cost-saving measure, and that's really helping us. But of those 69 kids, none of them are from Facein. All the kids are going to Facein that can, and the other ones are going other places. And I look at the valuable work that Lisa did, and she saved us $438,000 in our offsetting revenues between last week and this week. So we've not cut our budget, but we're seeing our excess, we're seeing our cost per pupil dropping by that 438,000, and we're saving 227 by cutting pre-K. Now, I don't think it makes sense. I mean, you guys are way smarter. You've been here way longer than I'm very new here. Reconfiguring. I'm sorry I use that word to public. I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, we need to make preschool hubs. These decisions need to be made. I talked to Dr. Mike today. I understand parents need to know where their kids are going to school next year. Friday is the day that we've put in place. I just urge us to really look at it. Where are the best classrooms? Where's the best program? I mean, Jessica came here tonight. She's the pre-K after-school teacher at Waitsfield that's supporting things. Can she do that off-day care? Can we use Facein and Waitsfield to have the 4-day, Monday through Thursday coverage? Is that something that we can do? Can we figure that out by Friday before Dr. Mike sends out his letters? I just want us to, people have sent emails. They say, please tour all the facilities. Can we just take a real look at this before Friday, before we make a final decision? Because I understand there's so much emotion and no one wants to lose their pre-K, but what I really care about is getting these kids the best possible education. When we were talking about school nurses, Dr. Mike said, I'd prefer to have 2 more early interventionists than school nurses. And I didn't understand what he said at the moment. But these kids are entering the school district, and we need to find these things, because if we don't, we can catch these things early. We can reduce our special education spending. We can get these kids to stay on course. So by cutting our public pre-K, which is such a powerful thing, reconfiguring our pre-K, we're gonna have less seats. Are we gonna occupy those seats? I'm not really sure, but we'll save money in the long run by catching this stuff in early intervention and helping these kids learn. I really appreciate your time today, and I thank you very much.
And I would just say, an added piece to that is if a hub would, if we moved the hub away from Brookside, we'd hear from Brookside families. If we moved the hub away from Moortown, we'd hear from Moortown families. There is, again, no perfect arrangement we could go through, and I can go through every building. And what I will say is, our team, who are the specialists trained in the pre-K program, we have been looking at this, and the principals, myself, have been looking at this for countless hours. This has not been a rash decision based on a 20-minute meeting that we had and information that we've collected from 2 years ago. We've spent a lot of time in the fall, so it is thoughtful. But what I will also say is no matter what is the location and the arrangement in a hub situation, there are going to be challenges. There are going to be pieces that people are not 100% happy with, and I understand that. And there is no perfect solution. Perfect solution would be funding. And I would also say, too, it goes back to what I've been saying to parents recently, that, again, pre-K is a program most other states do not have. We're very fortunate to be able to have funding for pre-K. It comes at a cost, and that cost comes out of the education fund, and that's another piece that I am very happy to advocate, and I've shared with state representatives that if we want to guarantee that the advocacy can't happen just at this board table. It has to happen at the Committee of Human Services that Teresa chairs, that is talking about this, because they are all policy decisions, just like Act 127, and the reason that we're in this situation to begin with. So in the end, we will have a decision, and it's going to, again, be based on a number of factors, and one of which is just geography. The last piece I'll just mention is that all of our buildings, because of the way we're set up and because of our geography, have students in not only pre-K but other grades from other buildings. We have, for example, students who are from Moortown who attend Brookside because they live in Gallagher Acres. We have students who go to Moortown from South Duxbury who should go to Brookside but go to Moortown because it's geographically more convenient. We have families in all. I can go through every single building, and we have all kinds of arrangements based on where people live, and our system has always been very town-based and IDC from those towns. There's other ways to look at it, and I think everything we're doing, we're learning from that and can bring back to the board and take a look at different approaches in the future.
Had it before. I just want you all to know that back when I was the principal at Duxbury in the mid 1980s, Bill Regal and I started the first preschool in Waterbury at Thatcher Brook, and it was a combined Duxbury-Waterbury program, and it was by a lottery. And people had to, we don't want to use that word because I know we're not talking about going to lotteries, but we did. That was what it was at that time, because there were more kids in between Waterbury and Duxbury that the families wanted them in preschool. And that's what they did. But it was the first one. It was quite revolutionary. We had a wonderful teacher, and I don't know where it went. I left Duxbury 2 years later, and Duxbury left Duxbury another 4 years later. So I don't know exactly how it washed out, but it's now the Brookside program.
And up until, I believe, this year, there have been schools that have used a lottery, including Brookside. So that still has continued, but we have not had to have any lotteries this year just because we have availability in our programs.
Any more questions?
So I just feel like, given all of the attention that we've had to dedicate to sorting out the concerns about preschool, I feel like I just want to make sure that I'm clear on something that hopefully then the community is clear on, is that we're not looking to cut preschool programs. We are looking to create hubs to better utilize resources based upon the number of students in pre-K that are needing pre-K in our district.
That is correct. we believe we will have more than enough spots, but it will create situations where there may be moves that people have to make, and it may be a further distance than what they have right now. But that is accurate, and that is the challenge. And again, it's something that we are doing because we have capacity and we have a continued decline in enrollment.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yep. Apologies about interrupting there. So I just wanted to say that I'm right there with Dr. Mike in the fact that I think if you were to take everyone and personally view the facilities of each of our communities, we would be personally biased by our own communities. We also have constituents that we represent that are pulling very hard for their own personal spaces that are located in those communities. So I do appreciate the fact that it's being sort of taken out of our hands, and that it's being sort of appropriated based upon what the district thinks is appropriate for the district's needs, and that it's just a simple reallocation of resources rather than cutting anything. And so that is, I think, kind of the appropriate method and the appropriate way of doing things, rather than to try to barter our way through this or try to figure out whose constituents are the most passionate or have the better play on, who has the best facilities or what have you, because I think those are all things that are already taken into account and things that we're not thinking about. So I appreciate Dr. Mike's perspective on all of this, because it helps us out with our own constituents to say that this was sort of taken in as a larger whole as the district's needs rather than any one town's needs. So thank you for that.
I just wanted to be able to share with you the ballot language. We do need to put in what our actual budget is of $51.8 million, our cost per pupil, and then we also have to include that percentage increase over last year or the current year. So this would be on one of the articles. Next week, I will bring the warning up for everybody to approve and sign. Next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the 3.73 looks better than the 5.44. So is it because the yield has changed or what?
That's the cost per pupil change. So that's the cost per pupil. The 51.8 million is a 5.4% increase year over year for the budget, but we have to increase that we have to include that 3.73 cost per pupil increase.
Steve, she found another $438,000 in revenues we bring in based on special education, which then lowered our cost per pupil. So the budget stays the same, but our cost per pupil goes down because you take the number and you minus what we bring in, and that gets our cost. If you look at that chart, and that's where it's coming from.
As Rob said, the next slide is the big reveal.
Yeah, the 5.4 is the year over year increase. So then the takeaways are the budget that Mike and I and the administration is recommending is a 5.4 year over year increase of $51.8 million. Our educational spend that we're asking the state to fund is $42.7 million, which is a 3.7% increase. Our LTW ADMs are slightly down by 1.3%. And our cost per pupil is up of 3.73%. And then our district tax rate is only up 2.7%. So those are our takeaways, and that would be our homestead district tax rate.
Okay, so now I'm getting confused, but I'm thinking back to when we had trouble with the budget before, and so based on what we learned yesterday in the advocacy workshop, you want to make it very simple for people to understand, and all these figures start to confuse people. So what's important, I think, is how is this going to affect my taxes? That's what they want to know.
So the one piece we asked them to approve the increase in the per pupil cost. So I would use the 3.7% because that is what we are asking them to increase. And Lisa and I have had extensive discussions about the tax rate, and that's again, I think we want to be transparent. And Lisa will come back next week with some more details. What we know and what Representative Stevens and Representative Wood had said is that the year-over-year state average that the governor is projecting from the yield is 12%. They are talking about a buy down. So what Lisa and I have talked about is kind of using her chart and then giving two comparisons, and it depends on what the governor says in his budget address. But if he does talk about buy downs, what we would be looking to do is to be completely transparent, to share. We've talked about sharing that chart, and then the chart is if the governor's proposal goes through with property taxes. And it's going to be, it's to your point though, when you have 6 towns, if we were Colchester or Burlington with one town, we could give 1%, but with 6 towns, there's 6 very different percentages. The highest percentage, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, is going to be phased in, and that's because of their change in their CLA. They're dropping their CLA. So you're absolutely right, Bobby. And Lisa and I are open for any recommendation the board gives to us on how to share that. We just want to make sure that what we share is being completely honest and transparent and presenting all the options and all the information, knowing that in the end, we're asking them to fund a budget that is an education spend that is 3.7% higher than last year.
So if you go back to slide 15, you'll see what the town's tax rates would be.
Want me to go back?
Slide 15. Right. So with the statewide adjustment, again, as we know today, if with the yield that we have from the December 1st letter, and what we know today without including any buy downs, this is what the town's estimated tax rate would be. And then you can also apply that based on a $100,000 home, value home, 200, 250, 300, 350, and which I normally do that chart, but I didn't want to make it complicated. So
and that will change if the governor changes the yield rate and buys down taxes.
She's probably
correct. So that's why I didn't want to go into a lot of detail, because it's most likely will happen. And so what happens if we come back next week, I'll be able to share more tax rate information. Because things can change.
And they will.
Right.
So I now learned more about yield. It's very exciting, and I understand how it gets operated. And we get 7 cents off the yield, which I don't understand, but I'll figure
it's almost over.
So that's like just have like a rebate. I don't want to ask that question. So how much could the yield effectively change? Is it 1,000? Is it 200? Like
it could change. I mean, it last year it was 9. It started out 8 something, and last year it went up to 9. 9. I think it was up to 9,846.
But that would make our taxes cheaper if it went up.
Yes.
That's great.
If the yield is higher, it lowers the tax rate.
Yeah.
If the yield is lower, it raises the tax rate.
Yeah.
And then, yes. And so And then also when you throw in that extra one-time funding,
75 million.
that changes.
Yeah, I mean, 3 meetings ago, you gave us some of our tax rates, and it was scary to me because I saw like a $450,000 home in Facein, which is really bad CLA, was up by like 2,400. But the numbers you gave us today, Faceин's only up like 1,600. But I know those could change, yield changes.
That's 16%.
No, I did your spreadsheet that you didn't do.
Okay.
It's like $1,600 a year raises in education tax, and like that's much better than the 2,400 that scared me with option one 3 meetings ago. So that's just because it's so close to the yield.
Right, but remember that's when our LTW ADM was really low. So our LTW ADM went up, and it helped us.
Yeah, because yes, yeah, I'm the pilot that knows numbers. Remember?
Questions, anyone?
I have a question kind of related to something that Emily brought up a while ago, the confusion over the universal free lunch. And this won't affect us right now, but thinking about the universal free lunch, does that actually cost us money? And is there, and the other part of it that I'm thinking of is if the state, so in the education fund, are there definitions of what that fund includes? And so that includes the universal free lunch. So if they were to drop that, it would lower what we need to raise. And are there other things like that?
Yes, in one of my presentations, I actually gave you the breakdown of that, and I believe it's like 50 million for universal meals. So that is part of the educational fund. Yes. So
yeah, my dad. They call it intentionally universal meals, and it's because my daddy always told me there's no such thing as a free lunch. Right. That's how I remember it.
While we're talking about lunches, so last week you said something about how if more kids took lunches, we would get more money, and that's all about how we get endorsed from this reimbursed at a higher rate, which is $7.50 a person for breakfast and lunch together. There's been some operational changes at Facein schools since that was said and now we've increased our breakfast intake by 30 to 40%. So they're doing things. They're making it so the kids are getting there. They're putting their little numbers. They're putting their little numbers in, and so that's just all about our reimbursement rate. That's why we want to do that. Okay. And my next question was, we are cutting food by 50,000 in this budget. No, we're not. I'm sorry.
I'm going to take that out of your vocabulary.
No, I don't mean, I'm sorry. There's a reduction in funding.
No, I'm reducing my subsidy. So we subsidize the food service program over $300,000.
Okay.
If I get reimbursed for more of those meals that I already purchased,
okay,
then I reduce my subsidy. So what I'm just doing is because money's being left on the table from the state, we're not collecting that money back, because we're not counting that lunch being taken. And even though I purchased the cost of that food, I'm not being reimbursed for it. So I'm going to, if I'm getting more money back from the state based on increased meal counts that I can say I need to be reimbursed for, I am then getting more money back to reimburse of the supplies, the food I purchased. So I'm going to be reducing my subsidy. It's a food service subsidy. I have to subsidize the food service over $300,000 because I'm not getting enough money back from the state.
So your mic's not on.
That is what appears. Okay.
So
it's a transfer. When you oversee the maintenance transfer and the food service transfer, there's a $300,000 transfer of food service.
I'm glad we straightened this out because that was not how I understood it. And I think that's how a lot of other people didn't understand it. So I'm glad I made the mistakes instead of the wrong. That was good. That was good. You're all taking things out of my vocabulary. So my understanding is basically we buy a bunch of food. If kids eat it, we get reimbursed for it. That lowers our costs because the state takes the load on that food for us. So you're showing a reduction because we get higher reimbursements by having a greater uptake of the kids with food. So the lesson here is there, kids need to eat breakfast and lunch at school.
And I also just want to point out this to make sure everyone's aware that the food isn't our biggest cost for cafeteria operations. The biggest cost, like anything else, is those of us who work there. Personnel costs are always the highest percentage of the costs we have, and that's because it takes people to run schools and programs.
So I think one of our big challenges here, and this is sort of going off a little bit of something that actually you said earlier, Bobby, about the question about how is it actually going to maybe change our property tax. But the other thing that I think is going to be very important, and we talked about this in the community outreach, is just making sure that the community knows that, yes, this is a 5.4% increase, but we are actually decreasing our spending by $1,036,000. And as a part of that process, we are cutting, this is on from slide 13, $240,000 in district-wide savings that don't affect education. So that's the other piece to this, I think, is making sure that we are making as many cuts as we can without affecting student outcomes. And when we talk about the ugly list starts to get into making significant impacts to what is available to our students. I think it's going to also be very important that we remind the community that 73% of our budget is salaries and benefits, things that we don't really have a control over. So really we're sitting around this horseshoe talking about the 27% that we can control, which at the end of the day is not a whole lot. And I think that's going to be something that's very important, because I hear people in the community thinking that there are activities that are being paid for out of the school budget. I see misinformation going around about the ski programs and tax money going to ski programs when that is not the case. Dr. Mike shared the email around about HARP and their fundraising for the $25 million we need for the renovations in the auditorium, because that hasn't been renovated since the 90s. Things like that are going to be really important for us to be sharing, that's not coming out of this budget. We're literally talking about the bare minimums to educate children. And it is just very disheartening to know that we're up to a $51 million budget, and that is really just meeting the necessities. I mean, thinking about the things that might have to actually be cut is kind of scary. Nobody wants to pay more. Nobody wants more, taxes. I don't want to pay more in taxes. But looking around at what we've already cut these last couple of years and what we're cutting this year, I mean, there's really not much left to cut unless we really affect what's available to students.
And one thing I just want to point out and correct it, just to say, of that 27%, there's a lot in there that were mandated. So we really don't have control over that below the line 20% operation.
So it's really less than 20%.
It's less
27%
than 27%.
I'd just like to say that these cuts affect people, and we're doing a lot here, and it's a victory, but it's also a loss at the same time. And we really need to be sensitive to we're cutting, and that's a real word, and this is not easy. This isn't easy for anyone, and we're doing the best we can.
And I'll back you up with saying this is really hard. And the part that's the hardest is that we're sitting here around this horseshoe and we're having this conversation, and we know we're thinking and talking about all these points, but translating that, getting that word out effectively in my 4 years on this board has been the hardest part, because there are people watching and listening, but there's not like this the buzz doesn't really heat up until we release the number. And then it's a lot of, but why are we paying for all this stuff? Well, you're not. We're paying for these things. And it is the communication is the hardest part. And the communication is what we need to be strong, because we want to pass budget number one. We want to go out with this budget and pass it, and we'll have a hard decision to make if we don't pass it. Do we bring it out again? It's the same because we have nothing left to cut, or do we start chopping up other things? I know we don't want to do that. And these are real people that we're talking about, and real cuts and real jobs and real kids. So we all feel the gravity here, and I hope the public is aware of that. Okay, where are we at? Do we have questions? Anything else for Lisa? Because now we're at the point where we've fine-tuned what we're looking at as a 5.4 increase that we are going to warn on the 28th. And on our meeting next week will just be a kind of a quickie. Sorry. Yeah, we're going to vote to warn it on the 21st. Right. So next week is the deadline is the 28th. Right. So we're kind of there, unless we're arguing minutia or trying to make a dramatic change. Does anyone have anything to offer that? If not, we're looking at this as our number. And I do really appreciate new guy on the board with a lot of questions being willing to ask those questions, because this is it's a great way for people to learn.
And I do want to say too, when Ashley, Cindy, Lisa, and I talked about the sequencing, one of the reasons why we did not want to put a warning on is we wanted to have another full discussion with the board, take questions, make sure you're okay with this, and then we wanted, just for public transparency's sake, to advertise that, wait another week, and then do the warning a separate week, just so people have adequate time to address the board, ask questions, or state comments that they may have. So that's why we decided to not ask for a vote on warning a budget tonight.
One other, and this is really more in terms of how we describe the budget. What I have heard from several people is, why are we funding mental health? And that comes up over and over. And I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention as I've explained it to people. First of all, our education is set up in such a way that kids feel respected and heard and appreciated in the classroom, and that does a lot to foster good mental health. But in terms of services, those are specific services, as I understand it, that apply to a small group of students with special needs for which we are mandated to provide those services. And that there are no other, we're not hiring therapists to work with the population. And, we're promoting good mental health through good practices. So I just wanted to clarify for anyone listening and and to make sure I'm saying the correct thing.
And that is an unfunded mandate. That's our responsibility. It's in our budget, but it's not up to us.
Yeah, I found a report online from 2021 that I shared with Mike and Ashley and Cindy that about 40 out of the 50 states cover these mental health funds outside the education fund. So when people say, why are education costs so high in Vermont? One reason is we're paying for a huge chunk of the budget that other states don't put into their school budgets.
For months now that I believe that those funds should be coming out of the mental health. What we can that, and also when we had all of our discussions about school nurses, I feel very strongly that if the health department was funding that, people would say we don't have a clinic in Waitsfield anymore, and so now we put a school nurse into there to cover that loss of those health professionals. It's the exact same thing. So it's both health and mental health that that I don't know, but whether health is also other states, but I was interested to see that the mental health piece.
Okay. We are going to move on from this. I think we have talked. Nothing. This is just discussion. Nope, we won't do it till next week. And so next week's meeting will be brief. Just if everyone's really thrilled about that 3 in a row, it's going to be quick. Okay, so we're going to move on and finish up here. The last thing we have to do is our consent agenda. That's to approve the minutes from the last week's meeting on the 7th, to approve the board warrant in the amount of $409,808.23. And we are going to approve the Harwood New England Music Festival field trip request. Do I have a motion? First from JB, second from Emily. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Wow, that was so easy. That part was just so easy. We're looking for one more motion. Do we have all in favor say aye? Aye.
Nay.
All right. Emily made the motion to adjourn and JB seconded. And we are closing the meeting at 9 p.m. Thanks, everybody.